Today I want to briefly run through the key elements of Lutheranism and the role of Martin Luther. Obviously this is going to be pretty much central to the course because Lutheranism presents a major challenge to the Catholic Church, and therefore it presents a major challenge to the Habsburgs. And we need to look therefore at a little bit of the theology of Lutheranism and what it actually means and why it was so powerful, why it consumed most of Central Europe. The first thing to mention is how religious people were at the end of the 15th, the beginning of the 16th century. We know they're religious because we can see the amounts of money they're giving to the church. They are paying money for chantries. Chantries are places where chanting goes on, and what is being chanted is the Mass. And you would institute a chantry, sometimes known as a perpetual chantry because it goes on all the time, a chantry where masses are celebrated to save your soul after death, or your friends in the guild, or your parents. You would pay a chantry priest or a team of chantry priests to provide a really perpetual Mass being celebrated. It costs, you can work it out for yourself. You've got to employ a team of priests. That's going to be costing you, a couple of £1,000,000 in present day money, and people do. Or they engage in confraternities that put their money together in a pot, and so you won't get a Mass said for your soul every day, but pretty frequently you'll have a Mass said for you. These are very, very extensive in the late Middle Ages. Pilgrimages, very extensive. Processions, very extensive likewise. The setting up of small wayside chapels, again, very commonplace. And increasingly too, the purchase of indulgences. Indulgences, you can still get them in the Catholic Church, they just don't sell them. If you go on a pilgrimage to Rome, you get an indulgence, and that says that you are forgiven your sins, providing you are contrite, providing you promise not to do them again, you will be forgiven them. The difference is in the Middle Ages, late Middle Ages, they're selling them. There's a good reason for this. I'm a very busy man. I haven't got time to go to Jerusalem, but I can pay somebody to go to Jerusalem for me. And from that original pecuniary transaction, all sorts of consequences follow, so that in the end, you are buying bits of paper for money that say you have been let off all your sins, and in some cases let off all the sins you commit in future. We think of Gutenberg printing press, 1450s, 1460s, something like that. The first thing it produces is not the Great Gutenberg Bible. The first it produces are pro forma indulgences. And if you go to the British Library, they have one of them on permanent display, or at least they did when I last was there. Luther doesn't like indulgences. He is a top professor at the leading university in Germany, which is the University of Wittenberg. It's a new foundation. It's been very generously funded by the Elector of Saxony, a man called Frederick the Wise, so called because he is. And Frederick the Wise has a collection of relics, and he doesn't like indulgences because it stops people are visiting and praying in front of his collection of relics. He's got about, I think, if you pray, if you've got 100,000 relics, if you pray before all of them, you get about 3 or 4 million years off your time in purgatory. And Luther preaches against indulgences. That's what the 95 Theses are all about. They're a criticism of indulgences and the money that he thinks is being misused from their sale, which is going to benefit the rebuilding of St. Peter's in Rome. And he thinks that's a very bad idea. It's the HS2 of the 16th century is the rebuilding of St. Peter's, and they did it beautifully in the end. He, having first attacked indulgences, ends up in trouble. And he ends up in trouble from the Dominican friars, because the Dominicans are the ones who are selling the indulgences. And they say, look, what's the problem here? The Pope's authorised it. And Luther says, well, the Pope shouldn't have done that. And they go, the Pope knew perfectly well what he was doing. Are you saying he was wrong? And Luther's caught out. And then Luther makes blunder after blunder in debates. And he says, it shouldn't be the Pope that decides these things. It should be a general council of the Church. They have got him at this point. You may recall, if you were paying attention last time, that appeals to a general council of the Church are heresy. And Luther has now committed a complete blunder, and Luther now breaks with Rome. In 1521, he's tried by the Emperor Charles V, but the Emperor has come to a deal with Frederick the Wise. Frederick the Wise has just secured Charles V's election by behind-the-scenes negotiation, and he is the Habsburg's chief ally in Germany. Charles isn't going to annoy him. So Charles V says, I'm going to condemn him to a ban of empire, which basically means he's an outlaw. You look after him. And Frederick the Wise does this, and he looks after Luther in his castle until the initial fury has parted. And Luther uses that time in the castle to translate the New Testament and also to start publishing popular works explaining his theology. And his theology takes time to emerge. Luther claims that he has his greatest thoughts while sitting on the lavatory. And in the lavatory in the Wartburg Castle, the lavatory is a place where demons live, by the way, and he has these thoughts to dispel the demons. They're open lavatories, they're very smelly, very unpleasant. You could believe that nasty things live down there. And Luther's theology essentially matures over a period of years. He says, what is the basis of authority? Is it these books all around here, full of saints' lives and papal decrees, and the works of the Church Fathers, St. Augustine, St. Thomas Aquinas? Does authority lie there? No, he says it lies with the Bible alone. And he, therefore, can cut away huge elements of Catholic tradition that he doesn't find in the Bible. That means getting rid of popes, getting rid of church councils, reducing the sacraments to 2, getting rid of transubstantiation on the grounds that it isn't found in the Bible, getting rid of the doctrine of purgatory, because that isn't biblical unless you read the book of Maccabees too with a particularly open mind. So in other words, we've got a completely new theological approach, a theological approach that is rooted in the Bible. It's actually very simple, because you only need the Bible in order to work out what is right and what is wrong, or rather, because we don't want any Tom, Dick or Harry reading the Bible and coming up with their own conclusions. It's what the clergyman says that's important. the clergyman on the basis of the Bible, and the prince, i.e. the local lord, for him to appoint the clergyman and make sure they stick to the right faith. There are other elements to Lutheran theology. I described last time a Catholic church service. A Lutheran church service is completely different. And it's largely Luther's disciples rather than Luther himself who pushes in that direction. And the first thing we can say is it's participatory. It has singing, psalms, it has sermons. The rood screen is pulled down. Sometimes the altar is moved on a table into the middle of the church. There is none of this excluding people other than priests from the bread and the wine. Everybody has the bread and the wine. There is some of Luther's followers go further, so there should be no institution even of clergymen, no institution even of priests. Just get rid of them. Anybody can give a service. So a huge amount of different elements of the Catholic tradition are just thrown out, and a completely new religion is put in place. One that doesn't have popes, one that doesn't have monks. Show me in the Bible where it goes on about monks. Doesn't have nuns, ditto. Doesn't have the high celebration of the Mass with all the hocus pocus that goes along with it. That allows people to sing, allows people to join in, and creates a completely different type of religious ambience. Of course, it's not. People flock to it. It's very popular. But partly because they're mixing and matching. It's not as if you come home and say, hi Mum, I've just become a Lutheran. People don't do that. What people do is they listen and they make their own accommodations, and they make their own mix and match, if you like, adopting a bit of Catholic doctrine, adopting a bit of Lutheran doctrine. Maybe if there's a Catholic church, still going to the Catholic church, then going to the Lutheran one. They're mixing and matching. So you've got ludicrous situations. You've got abbots who are still running an abbey with monks who nevertheless organise their church as a Lutheran church and run the sort of services that Luther would want. You've got nuns that continue to practice their vocation while at the same time reading Lutheran devotional literature. There's a tremendous mix and match, and particularly too, because Luther depends on the princes for protection, he depends on Saxony, later on he'll depend on Brandenburg for his message to be produced on the Rhine and Palatinate, on the cities in particular, which early convert to Lutheranism. So the princes themselves will make their own schemes of faith, laying down what people should believe. A bit like Henry VIII does in England, except Henry keeps on changing. Lutheranism is popular. And it's popular for a number of reasons. It's popular because of Martin Luther himself. He's a very charismatic figure. He writes in a way that Germans like. He writes in German. He writes actually in Chancellery German, so it can be understood everywhere. And he gives out such wonderful lines as, I shall set a fart. I shall set such a fart in Wittenberg as it will be smelt in Rome. Great stuff. If you've ever encountered German humour, you will realise how that is likely to go down very well. Germans like slapstick, lavatory humour. And he's very popular, and he's popular as well because the woodcutters publicise him, the verse makers make verses about him, And where there are Germans, there you'll find Lutherans. And the Luther's message in one form or another will spread across all the German territories. It'll spread all across Austria, in Hungary, amongst the German communities, in the cities and in Transylvania. Not much elsewhere. It's essentially a German religion that has been transferred by Germans. Okay, I'll finish there.